The first family who lived here were the Woodruffs. Amos Woodruff, he was originally from Rahway, New Jersey, and he came to Memphis in 1845. So up in New Jersey, he had a very successful carriage making business, and it was just, you know, like the Lamborghini of carriages. They were for the very, very wealthy. And he wanted to further his business down south, so he chose Memphis to move. They came down here to Memphis to open up Woodruff Company Carriages, and he opened up his carriage making business, and it actually flourished for 50 years here in Memphis. It was very successful. His wife Phoebe, she hated living down here in Memphis. She was used to, you know, high society and big cities, and she hated it. So after the Civil War, once everything kind of settled down a little bit, she saw that as her chance to get up out of town. So she packed everything up and moved back to New Jersey. Known as Millionaires Row to all of the locals. This was where all the, you know, movers and shakers and the very wealthy people wanted to live. And so he said, well, I'm gonna, you know, build a house for my wife on Adams Avenue to get her to move back down here. So she agreed, you know, once the house was built, she'd move down here. And so he did. He purchased the land in 1870 for a total of $12,600 and had the house finished in December of 1871 for a total of $40,000. So it took a little bit, about a year to build, which was very impressive for the time. Most of these houses took a long time, and this house was all built at one time. So he had a ton of people working, probably day and night. It was probably like an anthill on this property. People just moving, building. But he not only wanted to get Phoebe back, but he wanted to show, you know, all of his newfound wealth here in the city and have something very impressive somewhere very impressive to live. So the family moved in December of 1871. Anyway, 1878 comes around, we had the huge yellow fever epidemic. Well, the Woodruffs actually left town. They weren't around. Anybody who was wealthy could have, you know, gotten out of the city. So they did. Of course, when they came back, Mr. Woodruff's businesses just never really caught back on. He had to sell the mansion in 1883. Fontaines moved in 1883. Now, a little bit about history. Mr. Fontaine, he came to Memphis when he was 21 years old in 1861, right before the Civil War started. And he was really sharp when it came to business. He was from Louisville, Kentucky, and he kind of put his feelers out there trying to figure out what he wanted to do here in the city, and he ended up partnering up with Napoleon Hill. Napoleon Hill was the wealthiest man in Memphis at the time, and so together they created a cotton and wholesale factory. The High Cotton House of Hill, Fontaine and Company, and this, in its heyday, was the largest cotton and grocery factory business in the U.S., the largest inland, and the third largest in the world. So Mr. Fontaine, you know, made some pretty smart business decisions. He was very wealthy once the business took off. His wife Virginia, she was local. She was from Raleigh. Her dad was a sheriff. They met about 3 years after he moved here to Memphis, and they got married, and they had 7 children. And they lived here for 46 years in the mansion. Mrs. Fontaine, she died in 1928. She was the last one living here when she passed away. Now, when she died, the family heirs, they did not want to keep this house any longer. It wasn't just our house. Most of the houses up and down this street, or down Adams, like all 32 of these mansions, just this whole area, nobody was really wanting to live here anymore. Downtown was kind of moving up this way, and so everybody wanted to move east, which is the Midtown area today. So that was the new place to live. So most of the mansions on this street were sitting vacant. Well, our family decided to sell to the lady who lived right next door in the Lee mansion. That mansion is still there. Miss Rosa Lee, she was one of the daughters of the steamboat captain, Captain James Lee, who lived right next door. And she was running a free art school out of her house. She was the patron of the fine arts, and she wanted to bring something like that to Memphis. And so she opened her home over there for students to come and study the fine arts for free, which is a pretty sweet deal. So she needed the space. So 1928 rolls around, Mrs. Fontaine passes away, and our family heirs decide to sell it to her. And so she bought it, and she used both of these houses here, the Woodruff-Fontaine house and the James Lee house over there, for her free art school. And it was a free art school up until 1959. She passed away in 1936, but she, wanted to keep the art school running. And so her partner, Miss Florence McIntyre, the director of the art school, she stipulated that both houses would be used for the free art school up until the time that they didn't need them anymore. And they didn't need them once 1959 rolls around. We probably saw about 10,000 students come through the doors here on our property, as well as the Lee property, studying the fine arts for free, which was a pretty sweet deal. So 1959, the school, they just get too big for the space, and so they purchased a building over there in Overton Park, and now it's known as the Memphis College of Art. The Memphis College of Art did get their start here on both of our properties, which is very cool. Florence McIntyre went on to be the first female director of the Brooks Museum of Art. So, now, when the art school moved out in 1959, both of our properties were vacant, and Memphis was bringing in urban renewal all throughout the city. They were knocking down all these big old mansions, not just Adams, but Jefferson, Madison, Washington, Poplar, just everything around this area, knocking them down right and left, building apartment homes and parking lots and stuff. And it was fine in the 60s. We've got pictures of those two apartment homes over there, and they look really nice, but now, it's just not a great area. It just turned into crap. They started knocking them all down. There's only 7 left here on Adams. There's only 12 from that time, you know, the golden age of Memphis. Right around here, you got St. Mary's and the Madewell Mansion over on Poplar, Collins Chapel right behind us. There's a couple over on Jefferson, the Lowenstein Mansion right there. We were the only ones that were left. So in 1961, they actually had bulldozers right out in front of our house and the James Lee house. They were going to knock them down. And that's when the Association for the Preservation of Tennessee Antiquities stepped in to save both of these houses. So we just say APTA for short because that's a lot to say. We are the 3rd oldest historic preservation society in the U.S. We were chartered in 1951, and we have 13 properties across the state of Tennessee. And we had a Memphis chapter, but they didn't have a house, and so they decided to do a huge fundraiser to make the James Lee house and the Woodruff-Fontaine house their chapter. So we started the restoration in 1961 and we were finished in 1964. And we started with this house because this house had the least amount of damage. The James Lee house had a whole lot of damage. I mean, we only had $100,000 to start the restoration. And I mean, in the 60s, that's a lot, but it wasn't enough to start on both properties. So we did the extensive restoration here, and we opened the doors as a museum in 1964. And it was only going to be for architectural tours. There were no furnishings, and when you go around, you'll see all the awesome stuff that we have. But there was nothing in here, and people started getting word about, you know, us opening up this like fabulous house on Adams, you know, actually getting to see the inside. So we started receiving donations, and we've collected so much over the years. So we've been a museum ever since 1964 and a wedding venue. Historic tours are strictly historic tours when people come during the day, unless you can kind of gauge people whenever they walk through the door. We always stick to the historic tours, but of course people during the tours, they ask, you know, so is it really haunted? You know, and that kind of gives you liberty to go into some of the happenings, you know, and a little bit of the paranormal stuff. But if you got a large group, some people aren't interested. We don't really touch on it that much. We're just a museum that happens to have ghosts, so it's, you know, it's cool. We've got Molly Woodruff, you know, who is still here. Elliot Fontaine, the youngest of the Fontaine kids. I think he is still here. Mr. Fontaine, Mrs. Fontaine. I've had some people say that Phoebe Woodruff is here. I don't know. And there's also a little girl spirit that's still here. So lots of things. Things over in the top of the carriage house that used to be servants' quarters as well. So lots and lots of paranormal activity still here in the house. We do ghost tours and things. All right.